Greetings, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Dreamscapes. I know it's been a while, but I haven't had any volunteers. So if you want to talk to me, jump in. I got a wide open schedule. Today we have here our friend Brian from Minnesota. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. I can't do this without volunteers. You got to give me a dream to interpret, or I'm just talking to myself in the camera, and that bores me. So let's talk to actual people. So as per my usual process, I'm just going to have Brian tell me the dream. We'll go through it a second time in detail, and then we'll see if we can figure out what the hell this means. So I'm ready when you are.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So this one, it's going back a little ways, and it's still a little bit. It's faded a little bit since then. So I believe it started out with my brothers and I playing outside in the snow in the middle of winter. And from inside the house, I think my mom was looking on. And she was looking on, and there were, the sort of narrator's perspective of the dream, sort of me looking at the dream. I believe after we came in from playing in the snow, my mom had this sense of duty or inevitability while she was sort of looking out on us playing in the snow. And I think there's a better word, but inevitability is good. Like there was something that needed to be done. And I think after we came inside, after a little while of sort of, changing out of our snow clothes, getting back into our normal clothes, our mom wasn't in the house anymore, and she had gone out into the snow. And I believe there was going to be some sort of storm, some sort of snowstorm, and so we were all very nervous, and we realized we had to go out into the snow to find her. And so my brothers and I went out and followed her tracks in the snow. And the house I grew up in, we had about an acre of woods next to our house, and the tracks led into the woods. So we followed her in there, and at some point along the way, tracks of wolves joined her tracks in the snow. So there was, much more urgency because we have to, find her and help her. But as we are following her through the trail in the woods, her tracks diverge. They duck off the path into sort of like the thorns or whatever, and the wolves pass by and, for whatever reason, didn't notice that she had evaded them. And so we follow her off the trail a little ways, and I think we do catch up to her a little bit after that. She's standing on the ice of some kind of creek or river or something, and is now turned around and like looking at us, and this is sort of the first time she's really like acknowledged us or engaged with us in any way. And I think we're standing on the banks, and we don't quite get to her. We don't really interact with her before she falls through the ice and disappears, and is suddenly replaced with the dog that we had at the time, basically her dog. And then I wake up.
Wow.
So it's, pretty dramatic, pretty rife with meaning. There is a, I guess before you dive in and start associating things, the sort of backdrop of all this is that when I was 17, my mom died of colon cancer.
Wow. Yeah.
And so this is sort of like, within a few years of that. So
that is absolutely the kind of details that are helpful in understanding the experience. So again, my basic theory is, and shared by others, but this, from my perspective, is that the brain processes experience, and experiences we need to understand or come to terms with will often come back in our sleep, because it's just turning over these ideas until we put it into something we can understand or fully feel something we need to work through from that sense. So the question then would be, is that you had this dream before she died?
Afterwards. Because
without getting into specific interpretations, there seems to be a theme of danger. Wolves chasing. She's out in a dangerous storm. Wolves are chasing her. She's on thin ice, and she actually falls through. And it makes a tremendous amount of sense that she had died at the time. So you're most likely, suggestion, not. I don't want to put too much emphasis on it. Quite possible you're still at that time processing the experience of having lost her and the danger she was in and how it impacted you. So that's kind of it's like a glimpse of where I might be going with the questions, but that is step one. And I try not to jump straight from the first superficial explanation directly to, let me tell you what it means, because there's always more details that they help to give, what's my words? I can't find my words today. They help to give context for the imagery and a better understanding of the right way to understand each section. So that's what go ahead.
Do you want any of, because like I feel like I can draw some pretty close associations with some of the ideas and things. I don't know do you want?
I think so. I mean, we could. My typical process, and I'm flexible, but my typical process is then to say, okay, now we go back to the beginning. You're in the snow with your brothers, very opening scene, and then we kind of try and expand each of those sections a little bit more to get an idea of what you see, what you're feeling, and then that's what gives us better context for the understanding. And we might spend 15, 20 minutes going over it a second time, and it doesn't change anything you would say right now, but sometimes it does. So I kind of like to follow my process. I don't really know another way to do this. I just made this shit up.
You need to be like a blank slate and not influenced by anything, and whatever I have to say will still be there. So
yes, that's the thing too, is I want to be able to offer you my unbiased opinions, even if your opinion matters more. For sure. So speaking of which, if we just go back to that beginning, and you're out in the snow with your brothers, and you're playing in the front yard, backyard?
Front yard.
Front yard. Was that kind of typical in your experience of playing, actually physically playing outside with your brothers? It was typically you didn't want to be in did you have a fenced-in backyard?
No, neither were fenced in. Okay. The norm was the front yard, though.
Gotcha. Was there a reason for that? Was it just more interesting terrain?
Honestly, I think the backyard was more interesting. Oh. It was a slight hill with a sudden hill into a ditch
in the backyard,
followed by another hill and then a large hill. So it was, so there was a small valley about 6 feet and then a large hill right after that.
Gotcha. So if you really wanted room to play in on a more level space, the front yard made more sense. So this was kind of your typical play space, a little more even. Okay, gotcha. And was it kind of, you mentioned wooded acreage. Was it, were you guys living in typically wooded country?
I would call it, I kind of coined this. So there's like suburban, and I'd reverse it and call it super rural. Okay. So it's, kind of, pretty obvious if you live in those sorts of suburbs in, Minnesota or something. There's the sort of, it's not quite rural, but there was like a horse farm and a sheep farm in my neighborhood, even though it was in New Jersey. So I grew up in New Jersey, so people don't expect that. But it was not right outside of an urban area, suburbs. It was, I heard like coyote every once in a while growing up, and like cows moving and things. So
okay,
but it wasn't completely wooded, but it was about an acre of pretty dense woods. So
okay, very cool. Yeah, because I was looking at like this is not the plains, this is not the beach, this is kind of a quasi-rural area, or you say super rural, or super super
Should be like
suburban,
superscript.
sub rural, something like that.
Yeah.
I love playing with
Sub
words like
rural.
that.
Yeah.
How many brothers do you have, or did you have in the dream, and were they all present in the way they are in real life?
They were. I have two older brothers. They were present in the dream, not vividly. I think it was more sort of implied that they were present, but it was the camera, so to speak, was very limited to my perception and my mom's perception. All the other characters were, off screen almost, but they were implied that they were there.
Gotcha. So you don't have a strong visual impression of having seen them, spoken with them, interacted with them. It was more the experience that they were with you.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah.
Cool. And that, I mean, if we relate it to what you told me about your mom's passing, they also went through this experience with you. They had their own experience of it. So you guys shared that in a way. And if this dream is speaking to that experience, which logical connection, there's a part of you at this point that's acknowledging they came with me on this journey, whatever this thing is that I'm experiencing in the dream. Do you remember what you were doing out front, playing any particular kind of game?
I don't think so. I'm not really sure.
Nothing specific. Were you building a snow fort, throwing snowballs, playing tag?
Yeah, those were usually the usuals. Yeah.
But no specific memory of that in the dream. Just present with them, and you knew you were outside playing.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
There's no strong image of what we were doing.
Fair enough. Yep. And that's why I tell folks, and I mean, I said this off camera, but anyone listening, you can't do this wrong. If I ask you a question, you don't have the answer, you don't have a memory of it. It is what it is. Like I call it rattling doorknobs. Some of them come open, some of them don't. Sometimes like maybe there was a specific type of game you were playing and it was relevant and you didn't remember it until I ask you. Sometimes not. So we never know. But you also had the feeling that while you were playing, your mom was inside the house watching. Mm-hmm. Looking out the window. Was that kind of common for her? And she'd keep an eye on you. You'd see her in the window every now and again in real life.
Yes, more so towards the end though. She did a lot of meditating, usually by the window, and often listening to like Gregorian chants and things by the window. And there was that, sort of distant look in her eyes sometimes when she was sitting by the windows and things.
And she was aware that she was passing, and it took a while, and like the whole family was aware of it. This was happening. It was just a matter of time.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things with terminal illness. It's like, at that time she was very possibly expecting that she was going to die. So there was that sort of expression in the dream, like looking out the window, like with inevitability, like knowing that she has to do something.
And a very deep sadness of like, I'm going to have to say goodbye. I'm going to have to leave my kids. But at the same time, I'm going to watch them as long as I possibly can, as often as I possibly can, because I'm not going to see them again in this world. So that makes a tremendous amount of sense that, in your dream, you've got her. Well, and do you remember the experience that of knowing she was present watching, or you looked over and you saw her in the window? What was your dream experience?
I think the camera angle changed to basically like over her shoulder. Like it was no longer from the perspective of me in the yard. It completely teleported basically to over her shoulder.
Yeah, sudden change of perspective. That's pretty common in dreams too. This first, it's like goes from first person to isomorphic like Zelda, and then sometimes it'll go to the that free roaming third person like a drone view. All kinds of crazy imagery we get to help us understand. And then so there's probably a reason why it changed to her. So you're seeing now yourself from her perspective, basically. Do you have a strong memory of what she saw? What she was looking at?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't. No, I think she was sort of taking in the snowstorm and the weather more so than us.
Okay. Yeah, and this is one of those things where I'm starting to put little carrots next to interesting ideas that we'll come back around to, but I like to give people a heads up too, is like just about any time there's a sudden scene change in this way, like a jump cut, like you're watching a movie and this scene, that scene, and you go to the next one and you're seeing things from a different perspective. There's a reason the story is being told, or you're telling yourself the story in that manner. So there's something, and if we start putting the dream together in a story arc, in a sense, your mind is saying, think about when you played with your brothers outside during this time of your life, and now look at it from your mom's perspective. And then here's the next thing that happens, and that is that you come inside. So there's some. Did anything happen between that shift in the camera angle and coming inside? Like, is that what your mom was watching? Was you come inside, or did it now shift back to you in the yard and you walk inside?
I think I'm not sure of the exact sequence of events. Sure. I think we might have even come inside to find that she wasn't inside.
Yeah, that is what you described, that by the time you got in there, she was absent. She was gone.
Yeah.
You saw it from her perspective, and then, and these are the little triggers too. It's like playing in the yard triggers, mom watching triggers, coming inside to find she's gone. So that's kind of the progression of the dream. Do you remember having any thoughts or feelings, or your brothers saying anything, expressing anything to you? Did you panic? Was it more like just a sense of the house being empty and sadness? How would you characterize the experience of finding that she wasn't there?
I don't know. I think it wasn't panicky. I think we, again, my brothers are sort of off doing their own thing, it seemed like.
Okay.
But I think I wanted to find mom. And it was more of like we expected to find her here, but she's not here. So like, it was fairly casual. It wasn't super urgent.
Okay. And that's interesting too, that your brothers had diverged from you. Now coming into the house to find that she was absent, you actually made that discovery alone, and they had already gone, say, off to their room, off to the kitchen, to go to the bathroom. They were no longer physically with you as you made that discovery that mom was absent.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's right.
And that's another thing I put a little carrot by, like, why? Now your brain's saying, now imagine that your experience of this moment is different. They're not with you having the same experience like playing in the yard. This is now different. This is something else. Or my relation to that might be, it's like you and your brothers probably processed your mom's passing differently. They had a different reaction to it than you did. I don't know if that jives with your real life experience.
Yeah, I think even more broadly, they had a very different perspective of growing up in my household than I did.
Interesting.
So it was sort of a very just a theme of my entire childhood was they just experienced it very, very, very differently.
Yeah. And sometimes, if you get enough people in a household, and I mean, everyone's going to have their own unique experience, but there are some people who cluster sometimes, and then sometimes there's odd man out, black sheep, however we describe people that don't quite fit. It's nothing wrong with them, but their experience is different, and it makes it hard to maybe connect with other people. It's like, I can't even explain to you what I'm seeing, but it's not what you're seeing. Nothing wrong with that, but yeah, I get. Believe me, I get that feeling everywhere I go.
It's like, they're that just like super argumentative. Everything is escalation all the time and shouting. Wow. And I'm the more like, high in neuroticism, like slower thinker.
Gotcha.
Your frequency and volume is too much. I need to slow down and be more rational. While you guys are just like, everything's like a mile an hour above everybody's heads. Like,
yeah,
I can't take part in that,
Yeah, very much a different mode of interacting and processing that experience. So, yeah, and all of that from just this one little detail of how did you experience the sudden discovery that that mom was not present, and bam, we've got lots of interesting stuff going on. So and again, your brain is pulling your attention to that phenomenon in your family. It's okay. Now imagine you find mom's gone and your brothers are off doing their own thing, processing it differently, perhaps. Oh, I do remember, and I'm glad this is why I take notes, because you had mentioned that your mom was watching. If we back it up just a fraction, with a sense of duty or inevitability, or as if something needed to be done, and you weren't sure if those were quite the right way of expressing it. When we went over her processing her and the meditation and the watching, did that describe it better, or did you have a different set of words you wanted to try to find?
I think those words describe it pretty well.
The inevitability of her passing, the sense of duty to her kids, that's all there.
Yeah. It it was like she had to do something, like, excuse me, like, yeah, like there was something that she needed to do. Like she knew she had to go into the storm, even though she didn't really want to.
Okay.
And there was that just like I have to do this. Like I have to go out into the storm for some reason.
Well, that's a great metaphor for the inevitability of dying. You're going into, a life-threatening situation like a snowstorm, say at night, or but the storm's coming to you one way or another. You're gonna. I mean, we're all gonna get there eventually. It's sad when it happens young, but it's kind of the same in some ways. Like it's the same and it's not. That's one of those dichotomies. But coming up on that end is that portion right there when it's happening, and it's happening, and there's no way to stop it. Is I'm rambling, but that seems to be consistent for a lot of people. I mean, we all process it differently, but the sense of inevitability and that it's something that has to be done, you can't avoid it. That sense, and I don't know if it was you talking to your brothers that something needed to be done. Like, let's see, it's I can't read my own handwriting now. Normal.
I think you might be referring to us then realizing that we have to go out into it.
Yeah. How did that kind of happen? How did you come back together? Did they suddenly show up, or did you go looking for them and bring them in and tell them, like leadership style, you got to come with me, we got to go look for her?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I really don't know.
Yeah, and it wasn't, to your memory, it wasn't one of them that led the charge, so to speak. It was.
I don't think so.
That sense was within you, but they did come with you.
Yeah, again, they were still very much in the background.
Mm-hmm. Tagging along, yeah. It's interesting. And again, with the sequence of the dream is like, now imagine you process this experience alone, they're somewhere else, but you come back together for the search, whatever this search is, going out into the woods. Now you're back together again. Now, whatever that represents is, you do seem to be handling it together in a different way. Yeah.
They didn't stop becoming sort of background noise so much. They didn't really like enter frame. They were still, even when we were searching through the storm, they were just sort of implied that they were there.
Yeah. And that is an interesting distinction. So it wasn't them actively participating. They were in a way tagging along. They were brought along by you. Almost.
No, I didn't really lead them or convince them. I guess we did agree. It was agreed, but it was very sort of, implied by the narrator of the dream that they were there when I did that, when that happened. But there wasn't a whole lot of interaction between the three of us.
Gotcha.
We searched. It was just sort of like, and then we did this. And the camera going through searching for my mom was very much from my perspective at that point. Again, if my camera's at my face, they're just sort of back there somewhere.
But that knowledge of their presence, and this spurred a thought in my mind too, is with them less active, less engaged, not fully present, say on camera in front of you, definitely not leading you, but it speaks to something about bringing them with you conceptually, metaphysically, not physically. It's not like they're actually there, but you're bringing this idea of them with you. If that makes more sense. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's like less that they're there physically and more that the essence of them is coming with you on this intellectual processing. Is that making sense?
Sort of like their personalities are there with me? Or?
Yeah. Your image of them, your understanding of them, how you see them experiencing the world and their understanding as they express it to you. Seems like you're bringing that with you. Their perspective, the way they share it. Something there's some disconnect between the lack of their physical presence in imagery and action, but the knowledge of their presence. There's something. It feels like there's something there.
The sort of psychological concept that's coming to me is I don't know if it's dissociation or if it's some sort of delusion or if it's just the feeling, when I speak to them and what I know of them, it's just some sort of slight disconnect with reality. I think on Twitter, I think on Twitter, I mentioned something about my family sort of, getting into sort of rhetorical fortresses and not interacting fully with reality, not being completely rational, being very, very, reactionary and emotional and not grounded. Yeah. So it could be that my perception of them is that, or in the snowstorm, having them behind me is like, my camera on the ground looking at her footsteps is just very, very grounded, and I know what I'm seeing by my senses, but they're in the cloud somewhere. They've dissociated. They're now dealing with, straw men and red herrings and are disconnected.
Could be.
And,
that is,
and so they're not.
It's very important, I think, that came to your mind, because that's going to give additional context to kind of processing what does their presence mean. I think I've been explaining it poorly. There's like, let's say you had an uncle and he gave you a really important piece of advice and you always respected him, and later in life you come down to an experience where you're like, this is what uncle was talking about, and his words come back to you and you kind of carry a piece of his wisdom and that respect you had for his understanding. You carry that with you in life. So that happens a lot with people of our family, for good or ill. And for everyone we've ever met, if they made a strong impression, we carry a piece of them in our mind, and they continue to influence us, their perspective, their understanding, their hassles, even their bad examples. I'm going to never forget what that guy did, because that was stupid, and I'm not going to do that. So that person, that image of them comes with you in that sense. So that's more what I'm leaning towards with the brothers, is that there's it's more like your understanding of them is with you on this journey more than their physical presence and their actions.
Almost like if you had maybe like a good therapist and you sort of understand the sort of advice they would give you when you come to them with their problems, you can sort of, once you're outside of therapy, you might be able to predict what they would say in the moment or what insights they would give you, sort of.
Yep. Oh, this is Dr. John would say, I'm doing it again. I'm doing the thing. I got to knock it off. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. You would say this here.
So there's something like that, I think. This is my gut impression of what's going on with your brothers and why they're not on camera, why they're not more active. It's more like you're bringing your image of them with you on this journey for some reason. And so maybe we'll figure that out. Maybe we won't, but maybe we've spent 10 minutes on a meaningless distinction. Who knows? I find this stuff fascinating.
Yeah. And I think we covered some good psychological territory in general.
For sure. That's what these, we're just two people talking about dreams. Sure, I have a psych background. It helps me, but it's just a conversation. We're just people talking about interesting concepts and how they might relate broadly to everybody, universally or specifically. That's I love doing these things. I do. So, and we paused in the whole like carrying forward with the dream for good reason. But you also mentioned that now you're starting to track her by her footsteps, which is an interesting thing. If we think of the metaphor, you are quite literally following her footsteps. Or following in her footsteps in a way.
Yeah, in more ways than one. in 2019, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis,
Oh shit.
and part of that is because colon cancer is in the family, so I have
Oh
a
yeah.
bad colon. It's one of the variables. I wasn't diagnosed when I had the dream, but many years later, I've in a way stepped into her footsteps. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I don't want to put too, although that came to mind, and I second guess myself all the time, like, oh, this is a clever association. Is it? Am I just being clever, or is this reasonable? That doesn't mean it's not. Doesn't mean it is. But the other thing too is that, well, if you're going to find someone, if you're going to track them down, if you're going to achieve locating them, following footsteps is just rational. It's no footsteps, and so let's use that methodology. And that might also speak to, you say your family may be in a more neutral way. They tend to be more passionate and impulsive. You're more maybe dispassionate, logical. So what's the logical thing to do is passionate thing to do, run full tilt screaming, "Mom," out into the darkness and hope she calls back. That's passionate, but your method is wait. Are there footsteps? I can follow that right there. That's so there's also kind of speaking to your problem solving methodology, maybe.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. I'm not just trying to blow smoke or be complimentary, but that's what I see. It's different, and they both have their uses. And the first thing you did was to follow her into this, or no, not the first thing you did, but the tracks almost immediately lead to this patch of an acreage of untended forest, so to speak, trees.
For the most part, there's a trail, like a U-shaped trail that goes,
okay,
in and then out.
A little walking path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple 100 feet.
And when you were a kid, or what was your experience at that place? Was it almost universally fun? This is a great place. We go play over here. Or was it foreboding? Was it dangerous? Did anything bad or good happen there?
For the most part, good. At night, taking the trash out when I, had a very overactive imagination. Every sound like conjures up the experience of like being attacked by animals.
Oh, for sure.
At night it was different.
Was that a branch breaking? What was that?
Yeah.
I get that too.
It must be like lions and things. Yeah.
Did your mom used to take walks in that little acreage? Like she'd go walk the loop just for towards the end? Did she do that for her health? Slowly walk the forest trail, or?
No, she'd go for jogs with the dog around the block.
Okay,
usually,
but not really. She didn't really frequent that area necessarily.
No, not really. That was more.
Did you go there ever, to your knowledge?
Probably. I don't really have any specific
memory
recollection. Yeah.
Yeah, if you did, like, it would be interesting. This is where my brain went with that. It's like, she didn't tend to go there, but in your dream, she did. So what is your mind saying about her going to that place? You just, again, random connection suggestions in my brain. It's like, it's a place you have generally positive associations with. So she's leading you, in your mind, her footsteps are leading you to a place you used to play, to a place you also thought in the dark was kind of scary. So there's this dual nature of the woods as a place of adventure, but adventures can be scary. And was it in that wooded patch where the wolf tracks showed up?
It's sort of undefined when exactly the tracks appeared. It's sort of just implied, by the narrator of the dream, hey, and at some point there were wolf tracks and she's being chased by wolves. And then I do believe there was a specific instance when we became aware of it, or when I became aware of it. And there's a little bit more urgency, like, we have to find her quickly. But I don't really think there's any specific place in the woods where the wolves showed up.
But it did seem to be after you followed the tracks into this acreage that you remember from real life. Somewhere after entering that space, maybe moving beyond it, but definitely passing through it, brought you to the realization of additional danger or more intense danger? Like when you initially went out into the snowstorm to find her, there was a sense of responsibility for her safety more than a panic for her immediate physical. How would you kind of characterize that versus this sudden uptick in, okay, now there's wolves and we really got to find her?
I think responsibility is a good word. Yeah, I don't think there was so much panic. Not really a whole lot associated there, other than like, we need to find her.
Yeah, no, I think now that I kind of remember, I did find you come inside and there was no panic to find her missing, but then but I never really asked you why you went looking. You could have just said she's not here and thought nothing of it, but there was a reason you needed to go. There was a feeling of a need to go to find her. But then that need kicked up a notch. You realized there was a more immediate threat. In the beginning, it was more like it's just not safe in general to be out in the dark. Was it dark? I keep assuming it's nighttime in this. Daytime,
no,
nighttime?
Pretty much daytime, yeah. I mean,
okay, good deal.
Bright overcast kind of thing.
Okay, kind of a no real intense impression of where the sun's coming from, but daytime.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well that is good too. Was it ever nighttime in the dream? It all took place during the day?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, I mean that is a useful detail. I had the complete mental. Part of this process of going through it a second time is to make sure I'm seeing what you're describing as fully as I can. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we're not looking at the same. I'm grabbing the tail, you're grabbing the trunk, and we both think it's a different animal. But so that's good. Just to clarify in my mind, any knowledge or experience of reaction from your brothers? So like, did they share your increased sense of urgency, or still just along for the ride?
I think they're just still along for the ride.
Okay. Fair enough. Do you have a sense of how much time passed between seeing the wolves' footprints get on her trail and then the divergence? Brief, long? Any change in scene between the two?
No, it was very much implied that it just had been happening.
Okay.
That it was sort of like, I saw the wolf tracks appear alongside my mom's tracks, and then almost like in a movie, the screen sort of went black, and then it said like, this happened for a while, and then the lights came back up, and that was diverging.
Kind of a sudden scene change.
Yeah. Okay. It had been happening for a period of time, but
fair enough. Yeah, some people have a scene change. The most common. Some people have like very long, protracted. Like people say that they feel like they spent days in a dream, or at least felt the passage of multiple days. That's very interesting. This dream that could take place in 30 seconds in real time feels like a week. What is that? How does that even happen?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm still blown away by that. Hopefully by the time I get to, I was saying this should be episode 54. It's 54, roughly 50, 51 people I've talked to. I talked to a couple of people twice, but hopefully by the time I get to 1,000 dreams, I will really know what I'm doing. We're gonna hope, cross my fingers for that.
And then you go back all the way to the beginning and then tell them like, well, completely wrong about your dreams.
All that shit I told you, fucking disregard that. It's whatever. I didn't know what I was doing. 10,000 hours to become a master. Then I will really earn the beard. No, but it is interesting. So maybe it's interesting, maybe it's not, but the idea of the tracks being parallel. So the danger was walking with her in a way.
I think it was more or less intermixed. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And then a jump cut. So yeah, again, doing the story arc and scene changes, and each thought triggering the next. We've got to find her. Okay, walk into the woods, following the tracks. Wolves. Scene change to sense of increased danger. Wolf tracks. Scene change to she's safe. She got away from that danger at that moment, and the way you described it seemed like you were surprised Like you didn't know how it happened. She dodged it somehow. She got away from them.
Yeah, I don't know if I was surprised. This might have been some like slight lucidity or lucidness in the dream where like, or maybe it was sort of I realized this after waking up that like, you know, she shouldn't, if she had tracks in the snow, she shouldn't have just been able to walk off the trail and the wolves would keep walking. They would just see the tracks or smell her and follow her.
So it was kind
So
of
I don't know.
retroactive surprise, but in the dream it made perfect sense.
Yeah.
Of course, okay, her tracks go this way. She dodged the wolves. You just accept it this is what happened. There's probably some kind of meaning in there too. Like there's did she have some close calls towards the end where she could have died more suddenly, but got beyond it and lasted longer? Is that kind of what it's speaking to?
I don't think it's speaking to that. I don't think so. She definitely went in and out of remission.
Okay. It could be something related to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, fair enough. It makes sense or it doesn't. The way you described it originally was that she diverged into some bushes or brambles or something.
Yeah.
What was your memory of that?
Well, that place, like the actual specific place where she went off the trail, was one of the places where I would go off the trail and like make forts and things.
Okay.
So there were a handful of spots where you could do that without it being where the places weren't overgrown. And this was one of them where it was a bit of a clearing with, maybe a fallen down tree and you go a little further and there's, I don't know, some like cool hangout places where the bottom limbs are high enough where you can like sit down under them, but there's so much shade that nothing else grows under it. So there's sort of like this, like almost like a hut, but then there's grass right outside I don't know,
like a circular perimeter.
Yeah, kind of. And so like deer and things would always chill in there, because there was shelter from the high grass, but it was still high. So like a little hut almost.
Yeah. That's interesting too. So the place that she left the trail and the active danger of being pursued by the wolves went away was when she turned towards a place you used to play as a kid.
Yeah, it was a familiar place. Yeah,
a familiar place, but been positive association place too. There's something going on there. And I get these themes. It's like what ping 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 keeps coming up too, and it's something about the experience of a childhood enjoyment of life, the play, the good memories, and that they seem to be associated with her, but in like in a way, in a saving way, in a minimizing of danger way, in a removing the negative kind of way. I'm expressing that extremely poorly, but there seems to be something coming back vaguely that I don't know.
I think it was more. I'm not sure she was aware in the dream that was a familiar place to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was more that I realized it or I knew it as a familiar place, but I don't think she had any association with it. It was sort of the first, really from that side of the path. It's one of the first places you can actually get off the trail into something else.
Fair enough. That might be a better, more directly logical connection to it as well. Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I think I see patterns and I don't. I'm a bit of a legit autism pattern recognition machine. False positives happen, and I think, am I seeing a pattern here? It's really the only way to do it is to check.
Yeah.
And so it was this in real life. If you do diverge on this known actual physical path and you keep going, it takes you to a lake or a river.
No. So there's like a complete location change. Like almost as though the camera goes off that trail, it's black, and then like opens up, and there's I guess actually it's like two locations are sort of merged, one that exists and one that doesn't exist. Like,
And the location that does exist, what could you say
so
about it at the place you've
it's
been there
that
before?
one. So it's that one. It's where the trail diverges.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's almost like I'm standing there in a real location, but where normally the stuff that's normally there is now replaced with like a river or a lake or something, even though that wasn't there to
Okay, so
begin
you
with.
didn't actually go off the trail at the real location into the place where the trees shaded, with the
Right.
low hanging branches. What you came to where that should be is completely unknown territory. Now it's a lake or a
Yeah.
river. Was it a lake or a river?
There's still, um, I guess it's like, it's frozen over, so it's probably not fast moving, but it's smaller than a lake. It's probably, which is weird that I can
Pond.
estimate the distance. Yeah, it's like 20 to 30 feet across.
Fair enough.
More.
Yeah. That is amazing, isn't it? You get those images where it's like, why do you
Yeah.
know exactly how big this pond was, and
Yeah.
what does that mean? Why is that detail even important? But so it is interesting though. It's not a fast-moving river that's frozen over. That's its own kind of thing. It's not a ginormous lake that just crusts at the edge. It's a smaller area, and so and that is interesting too. So there's something going on here as well with the idea of the change from familiar territory to something completely unknown, a place that shouldn't exist where it is.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's like it's off the beaten path into unknown territory, which
Yeah. Yeah.
the first thing that comes to my mind is losing your mom is unknown territory. You've never experienced that before. She's always been there, and now she's not. You are somewhere else entirely, and maybe with no
Yeah.
map. But here in this dream, you get into this place, and what you're doing is you're surveying. You're like, okay, I can get the lay of the land. I can see exactly how big this lake is, and there she is. And when you saw her standing there, this was the first time you said she turned around to acknowledge you. Like she hadn't even really seen you from the window. There hadn't been any interaction.
Mhm.
And you got to the lake edge? Did you start walking out on the ice?
We definitely didn't go on the ice.
Okay.
I'm not really sure how close we were to the edge. Uh, yeah.
Fair enough. What would guesstimate a distance away from her? Was she like in the dead center of the
Yeah.
lake? Okay, so she was in the very
Probably.
middle of a roughly, and that probably her size compared to where the edge was would give you an idea of the size of it.
Yeah. I mean, she's probably like 20 feet away from me, maybe 15.
And then what did she do? What was her interaction with you? I mean, she finally made, say, eye contact. She looks directly at you.
I don't know. I don't recall any strong emotions or conveyances of any kind.
But definitely the experience of being seen,
Mhm.
being acknowledged, your presence registering with her.
Mhm. Yeah.
That seems like something. And why at this point in the dream? Why at the very end, so to speak, like right before she finally disappears? She's finally gone
Mhm.
from the dream at that point.
Yeah. The word afterthought kind of comes to mind,
Afterthought.
almost like we were the afterthought, as though you know her duty to go out into the storm was her primary motivation, and then we were sort of an afterthought. But
Interesting. Did you,
yeah.
following just that word, just if we just jump on it and try and write it somewhere, did you feel like she was preoccupied with her own experience of passing and that it was hard for her to stay connected to the people around her at the end? Like it was it was her preoccupation with that was an impairment to being connected with the people she'd had a hard time saying goodbye to. So is there something in there?
I think I'm sure she was preoccupied with it.
It's hard not to be. I mean, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They were. I mean, I grew up pretty religious, and she had very, very close friends within the church, and it was a very, very, very supportive church.
Okay.
And I mean, if anything, she was closer to her girlfriends. So
okay.
yeah.
Did you feel like when you were a kid, did you feel like she was more distant at the end, or was she more huggy, lovey? Definitely more distant.
Definitely more distant. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I'm not judging that in terms of everyone's going to deal with this stuff differently. She might have felt like, who knows? I mean, there's two sides of it. Like she's self-absorbed, and I'm going through this experience. Woe is me. I'm not saying that's what happened, but that is one way some people react to it. Another way people react to it that might give the same impression is, I don't want to inflict my suffering on my kids. I don't want to see them looking at me with those eyes of pain and loss that is about to happen. So there's two different reasons for potential avoidance behaviors. And they both have their own validity. I mean, far be it for me to tell anyone how to deal with their own passing. But it's complicated when you got kids. I mean, some people want a room full of family, hold my hand until I go. And they want all those faces looking at them. That sounds horrific to me. I would rather not have 20 people watching me die. To each their own. That's just me. I'm like, I can't handle that. So she may have been going through. I don't know what your experience is. I'll shut up and listen to you.
My parents, to say they kept it from us, I think is a little bit strong, but they definitely shielded us from it a little bit.
Okay.
They were quite avoidant, I think, in a lot of things,
Gotcha.
and distant, and maybe afraid of that level of intimacy and difficult being genuine.
Yeah.
And so, and I mean, I was 12 when she was diagnosed. If they had dropped the full weight of it on me at 12,
yeah.
I mean, I think I think my dad did have the talk with me, but it didn't mean anything to me at 12. I don't know what cancer is.
Didn't really fully process it. Your mom's sick. She might die someday. And it's like, well, doesn't everybody die someday? Yeah, you're not really equipped to. You mean tomorrow?
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely respect the perspective of they have to live their lives unhindered from this, right? Or at least their intention to do that.
Yeah.
So
that's a tough thing too. How much do you shelter? How much do you bring them in on the gory details, so to speak? I mean, what can a kid handle? You're almost guaranteed to do it wrong, no matter what you do.
Like my dad towards the end, he was living at the hospital basically. So I didn't.
He's gonna hold her hand till the end. That's how I'd be. I couldn't help it.
Yeah. So I mean, I can't hold that against him. I can't fault somebody for not, dragging me along and having me live at the hospital too.
Yeah. Well, at least it's an open question whether you should, and opinions vary. Once upon a time in America, we used to continue the tradition of wakes. And I don't know if you know where the wake, I mean, people think to the traditional Irish wake and everyone gets drunk, and maybe that's the way they do it, but maybe that's a stereotype. But we really did used to have wakes even in America, because you would lay someone out in the living room and wait to see if they might wake up. Because some people gave the impression, our ability to diagnose this person's definitely dead has varied across time. We have buried people alive thinking they are dead. So the tradition of the wake is to make sure you don't bury someone alive. Maybe they were close to death. You couldn't find a pulse. You couldn't detect breathing. But then miraculous recovery, and people have sat up at a wake. That's where the Finnegan's Wake song comes from. Just speaking of the traditional wakes, Finnegan, they're having a loud, raucous party, and he jumps off the table and says, "Give me a beer." He woke up at his own funeral, basically. So where was I going with all that story? Whether or not to, I mean, that used to be a more common experience. We used to be a lot closer to death, and it's been only the last 100 or 50 to 100 years that now you call an ambulance, and now they go to the hospital, and then they're, in the hospital with the sheet over them, and it's very few people present for the death process, for experiencing death. You don't have your relative's body on a table in your living room, having everyone come over and say goodbye. That's something that used to be common. We don't do it anymore. So all of this from she's standing on the ice, and the afterthought or came to your mind of, so maybe this experience as a kid of feeling left out, feeling that there were other priorities, and personally being the one dying, it's a huge priority that your death is pending. So of course the people around might be relatively less important, even if you don't want to, it's not on purpose. So
yeah,
something like that. All of that came from you mentioning that. I don't know if this makes sense to you, if that's jives with your experience.
I don't disagree with any of it. I think I agree with most of it. So
fair enough. Don't want to speak for you. But there was definitely, so you see her on the ice, and there is a turning. Her back is to you, and then she turns around, or she's standing there, and your experience of her is, now she sees me as soon as I approach the lake.
Excuse me. I don't think there was a turning. I think when I got there, she was facing us.
Okay. And it was almost instantaneous, or soon after the experience of being acknowledged by being seen, that she falls through.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. Yeah.
Okay. And so there is something about approaching the lake triggers, or passing through that area of your childhood play brings you to the lake where there is this experience happening, but it's approaching triggers the seeing, triggers the falling, and it was just was there, did you reach out? Was it just bloop, gone, no expression?
Yeah, it was almost implied that she fell through. Like, there, I don't think there was a strong image of it happening.
Gotcha.
You know, almost like
go ahead.
Yeah, almost like it was implied she fell through, and then where she was, her dog was there, basically.
Yeah, and what was this dog? What was your experience of the dog, or her? Was it a companion animal she got after she was diagnosed?
Kind of. I think so. I think we had a dog before she was diagnosed, and then at a certain point, that dog, I think what happened was that dog died or got put down, and it was like, like a few weeks went by, and my parents were like, okay, like, we're not going to get another dog. And then, like, on the way back from the hospital, I think, like, my mom, like, they passed, like, an adoption center, and my dad, like, knew what was going to happen if they stopped. And he was like, we can't do this. And then they stopped. And, like, of course they got a dog, because how can my dad say no to my mom, like, fresh out of the hospital kind of thing?
Yeah. It's
like,
one of those.
We got another dog.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. That idea of how do people cope? How do you just live as long as you can with something terrible, is going to happen? Maybe you need a little companion. So what kind of a dog was it?
I think this one was a Springer Spaniel Poodle mix. It looked like a Portuguese water dog, but smaller.
So kind of a medium to smaller, not a purse dog, but not a Great Dane. Somewhere under Labrador size.
Yeah, our family had like a type of dog we went for, and it was like that. It was like, we had a Cocker Spaniel, Cocker Spaniel, and then a Springer Spaniel Poodle, and like that was our dog.
Yeah, I think my parents had a Springer Spaniel. I think that's what they had. Kind of a longer, kind of floppier ears, a little longer coat. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We kept it like
that. But with the poodle mix, I don't know. That's curly hair.
Yeah. We always got like something, like my family was very like, they had like their rules. Like, we always got something mixed with the poodle because they're like smart and trainable, and then we always got like medium, small. Almost always good with kids, and it was very like, we knew what we were getting when we showed up. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
Like, it was like going to type. Yeah. Like, exactly what car you're going to get when you go to the dealership, and so it's like everything else is just like, nope, I'm getting this. Bye. Like,
for sure. Yeah, I'm definitely a truck guy. I'm not a little, 2-door coupe, or what are these the Tokyo Drift type of little lowered cars. It's not my thing. If I can't take it off road, I'm not driving it. That's me.
I've got a Corolla. So I don't know.
Is this, say again?
I've got a Corolla, so
is that the kind that they modify? The little Toyota Corollas? Kind of what it is?
Okay, I think think they might be like Civics. I know they'll do that.
Yeah, that's right. The little hatchback type of things. Yeah. That's cool. Was it kind of iconic towards the end that this dog was laying in bed with her? Is that kind of keeping her company?
Pretty much. Yeah. Especially while my dad was at work and things like that. Yeah. It was very much her dog. She was a stay-at-home mom, so throughout the day it was either girlfriends or her dog. So
very much so. And then, what was your experience of the? So it was where she was standing that the dog, and this was your experience in real life too. That after she passed, you still had the dog. The dog was there in her place in a way, like where
kinda,
because they were always together. Your mom was missing now, but the dog was still there where she would be. In a kind of way, I mean, literally represented in this imagery of the ice. She disappears, and the dog is still there. Any interaction with the dog?
No. That was I woke up after the dog appeared.
Wow! And then we come, what was it? 45 minutes later, we come to finally back to the end of the dream that took like 5 minutes to tell. This always happens, and it's perfect because I think we covered a lot of good ground. But now, unless you have more details you just remembered about the end, now we get into listening to your thoughts and seeing if some of my suggestions jive with what you already thought in the beginning. Phase 3, basically.
I feel like we covered it.
We dissected quite a bit. I mean, but this is just the imagery, and we may not get too much more. But now there's the arc, like there's the story. Why this dream? What was this? What were you trying to process? What were you trying to tell yourself about this experience a couple years after having gone through it? There's something that's kind of what we get into with the phase 3 things. Like, okay, now what does it mean? Not just identifying the imagery, although that's a great beginning and absolutely necessary and to the process. But I think a good place to start would be you had your own impressions you were going to tell me before we started the deep dive. Do you want to share some of those just in general and see where they line up with what we've already said, or where they differ, or where we left something out?
I think I'm good. I think we kind of disproved or supported them as we went.
Fair enough. You feel like you contributed those things as I was asking questions? Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Okay. I didn't know whether you were not holding back, but keeping that list of prior understandings separate.
No, not really.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So I've thought about this a ton. So, yeah.
So did you get anything new from our discussion, like certain ways of looking at particular elements that hadn't connected before?
Definitely the thought of us being afterthoughts, and not a first priority when compared to her illness. It's a big one. Also the most recent one, a little bit of recency bias, but besides that, I'm not sure.
Fair enough. So if we go through it like in the arc of the story type of thing, you've got so this is pretty much clearly, I think, all about family relationships and your experience of the world that had brought you to the time you had the dream. Would you say in your real life at that time there was a reason for the dream, some recent experience that made you need to reflect on what you had been through? You said it was a couple of years after she had passed. So there's usually a real life trigger for why this sequence of thoughts, why did this idea need to be processed now to help you move forward with something or understand something that had recently happened that was similar, if that's making sense.
I don't think there were any recent events. I still get periodic dreams about her.
Yeah.
Nothing significant.
Fair
but
enough.
At that time I was getting periodic dreams about her, so it wasn't really out of the ordinary.
Did you feel like you had turned a corner in terms of processing her passing at that time? Like you never get over it, but it's no longer as intense and painful as it was. Is that kind of the time period where that changed?
I don't think so.
No.
So I was always somewhat detached from it. It
Okay.
was always very surreal to me.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, maybe that was a more maybe that was a more grounded thought process of it. You know, that was the more rational, logical um, thinking of something that was very like outside of my grasp. I don't know.
Gotcha. Yeah. When you were, you're familiar with survivor guilt, the concept.
Yeah. Hmm.
Did you feel like you were having that around the time of her passing, like feeling guilty that you couldn't do anything to prevent it, that you wished you could?
Not really.
Not really.
No,
Okay.
no. I was very. I mean, dissociated is sometimes like a very heavy word to use in psychology, but I felt pretty detached from it.
Yeah. Well, not
Like,
all of us process things in the same way, and some things are. I don't know. When we get into dissociation and things feeling surreal, we can dissociate due to shock, and it happens, but we can also be less emotional biologically. There is that, and that tends to be me. I mean, I talk in an animated fashion and have all kinds of opinions and ideas, and I laugh easily and all that good stuff. But when it comes to most things, I'm very dispassionate. I can talk about just about anything, even the most horrible things, in a rationally distanced manner. I cry when my cats die, that kind of thing. I cry if my wife's in pain, that kind of thing. But otherwise, I tend to be less passionate, less emotional, less reactive to situations. So I don't want to say that you necessarily that dissociating is necessarily negative, or that it having a less intense emotional response is necessarily dissociation. But some things can be, you can be shocked into numb, like, I don't even know what's happening. I'm not even processing this. Did it become more emotional for you later? Did that sense of surreal dissociation fade, or is that just kind of the word you gave to your emotional distance and it never really changed? That's just kind of how you live?
I think being detached from my emotions somewhat is kind of just how I live.
Gotcha.
I don't know how deep into that you want me to get. I think like
No,
I
we don't
think
need to. But it's a good point, because I don't want you to be hard on yourself about looking back on it and saying, why didn't I care more? You did, in your own way. You experienced as much emotion as you appear biologically capable of having. For that doesn't mean you loved your mom any less. It's one of those things that, for the sake of the audience, I don't want anyone to think there's only one way to process the death of a relative. There's only one way for a person to experience death for themselves. Most of our experiences are completely normal, especially with abnormal situations. Abnormal being we've never been through them before. Not that they have happened a million times to a million people forever. But yeah, things that are outside of our experience. If I could normalize it for you, for the audience, to say that this is not necessarily pathological. I think people are pretty hard on themselves and use a lot of the psych language in a way that's a bit too self-critical sometimes. When maybe the better way to go is to normalize it a bit. You're not hurting anybody by not having the same intensity of emotion as your brothers did. But were they more weeping, wailing, gnashing of teeth kind of people? Did they have a stronger reaction to this?
we never really talked about it too much.
Okay.
We had like a handful of family meetings.
Gotcha. Got to pull people together. Let's talk about this. Got to tell you what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, that only happened like 2 or 3 times that I recall. But we never really talked about it. I'm not super close to my family. They're definitely more passionate, but they're also a little bit more, avoidant of those strong negative emotions. Much rather make jokes and things about it than
Gotcha.
cry on each other's shoulders.
Got their own coping mechanisms. Yeah. Let's see. in my notes. I mean, yeah, I guess we really did cover a bunch of stuff. I was trying to get to the tying it all together. It's like what, and I've been digging around for that a little bit in terms of what is it your mind wanted to show you, to put together as a coherent string of ideas from beginning to end. You started in a place and you ended in another place, and there was a path you walked to get there. If you think of the experience in those terms and everything we've talked about and described, what would you say it took you from, and where do you think it led you to? Does anything come to mind in that story arc context?
Well, I think it helped understand her perspective and our, what we meant to her, or our role in her perspective and in her experience. Because a lot of it was, focused on her perspective and her perspective of us. So I guess it may have been trying to teach me, fill in what my parents didn't tell me or what my parents didn't talk to me about. It's probably that seems like it would be plausible, trying to fill in the gaps of what they didn't inform us of or talk to us about in terms of her experience.
That's good. No, that feels right to me too, and it better than I could have put it together with all my struggling, and I'd have to go back through things a dozen times and try and put together a coherent story. But it seems like maybe at that time you needed to put it to rest in a way. You needed to button it up. You needed to put it into its proper context and understand it in a way that lets you. This is what they talk about when they say you need to process your grief, or you need to put something behind you, or integrate the experience into who you are and your understanding of the world. And sometimes that happens in dreams. This is where we're processing the experience and saying, I get it. There's a kind of magical light bulb moment where sometimes we get things, we finally understand it, and it stops being troublesome in the same way. It's like, I could put that down now. I understand it enough. I don't have to obsess or feel bad about it. It allows us to, move on, to put it down and say, I solved that Rubik's Cube. All the colors are the same. Done. Put it down.
Yeah. There were a couple other, maybe like one or two other instances where I had this, where it might have been, some motorcycle going by. Okay.
I had a dog barking outside. I don't know if you can tell.
No, I can hear it.
Oh, good. I got the windows closed. So.
Where there were a couple of instances where I guess I and some family members were talking about my mom and my family after her death. And I guess I'm remembering one instance where there was sort of this like, my uncle kind of like looks me in the eye and says like, take care of your father kind of thing. And sort of like this little voice that is like, what about me?
Yeah,
So
that's true. I wonder if you gave him the same advice. Don't forget about your kids. They're still here.
Yeah. Well, that kind of connects to the, my mom not, possibly my mom seeing us as an afterthought, or, the dream telling me what my role and what my position and all of that was. Because I was sort of like, like, what am I doing here? What about me? Like, where's my guidance kind of thing? But.
For sure. Yeah. And that's one of those things where I think what I said before was like, you just can't help but screw it up. That's kind of the nature of the human condition. We're all, especially when you're dealing with those things that you've never, it's outside your experience. You really don't know what to do. And maybe you don't have you got an outline, but you don't really have a model for these are the steps. And this is how we're all supposed to do it. Families being so individual and different, and our culture being a little bit fractured in terms of ritual, and ritual gives us a map, gives us a known set of steps to go through. And sometimes if you don't have that, you're left wondering, did I do it right? Honestly, the answer is no, probably. Even following a ritual, we probably screwed it up. That's just the best we can do sometimes. Well, I mean, I probably kept you on here 15 minutes longer than you needed to, just trying to kind of tease out that final, how do we sum it all up type of thing. I'm willing to keep going if you got more questions suddenly, or we can wrap it up. These things don't have to go on for 3.5 hours.
I don't care. I've got time. I've got the rest of the day. I don't really think I have any other questions about the dream.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think we get. It seems like it was just a necessary experience for you to have to kind of help put it behind you and move forward with your own life with a better understanding. And generally, it's related to, okay, well, what do I do next based on where I've been and what I've experienced? What do I want? What's the right thing to do? That's a lot of what we're processing in our dreams too, is active threats that give us anxiety that carry over into our dream processing, but also those esoteric philosophical questions. What am I doing here? Alive. What am I doing here? What do I want? Where am I going? And then looking back where we've been helps pick out the trail ahead too, and watch out for wolves.
Yeah, definitely. And snowstorms.
Sure. Well, you did mention another dream you said was a little for fun. You want to just take a stab at that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we can if you want to.
Sure. So this one happened like a few weeks ago. I woke up and I think I went to the bathroom and I came back. And I was laying in bed and I almost never fall asleep laying on my back. But I was just like so incredibly comfortable that I fell asleep on my back. But the first thing that comes to mind is I fell asleep before I actually fell asleep. But I think what was happening was I started dreaming before I fell asleep. So I think it might have been my first lucid dream, like actual lucid dream, because I was fully aware that I was dreaming. And so what happened, so I'm like basically hallucinating. And what happened was a man materializes out of the ceiling like a horror movie.
Huh.
Like a giant paint bubble, and then it turns into a man and falls on the ground at like the foot of my bed and is like staring at me.
Jesus.
Like middle-aged old man, like gray hair and like smiling at me. And like this is like why I love reality testing and stuff. I grew up with like this overactive imagination, so I was always sort of having to speak to like this overactive imagination that's just like coming up with crazy shit, and I always have to like be rational with it. Mm-hmm. So he's at the foot of my bed, and even though my feet weren't hanging off the bed, they were in this half dream. And I knew that when he was doing this like weird like crab walk kind of stance, I knew that if he crab walked towards my feet, I would feel it because he would interact with my feet, and so I would know if it was real or not. But he phased through my feet, flipped through my feet using video game language.
Yeah.
And so I didn't feel it, even though like my feet jumped because I was like terrified.
Yeah.
So he phased through my feet and then like crab walked out of my bedroom into my living room.
Huh.
So I like knew rationally, okay, it's not real because I didn't feel him touch my feet. But I'm slowly starting to wake up, and I think there's this man in my living room. 15 or 20 minutes to believe that there was not another being in my apartment as I slowly started to wake up and I'm lying in bed like my heart is racing.
Well, now, so that's kind of the beginning to the end of this weird lucid dreamish experience. So, having gone through the process, I mean, I didn't take any notes. I said, let's just listen and we'll talk about it. I'll kind of throw it back onto you in terms of now that you've seen my process of the details and breaking down each part. Do you have a different way of looking at that, or do you have an understanding you brought with you that you wanted to share, and we can try and pick it apart? I don't know how you want to approach this.
I have no associations with the real world. None.
This one's just bizarre, huh?
I didn't know the man. I have no idea.
Did his iconic look remind you of any type of person? Like if you saw that person in real life, you might assume they were there for XYZ reason or engaged maybe in like a certain profession.
Maybe like a homeless man or a hobo of some kind.
Okay. Someone maybe down on their luck, someone out of doors, someone who's seen better days, someone who's experienced a hard life. but he was smiling, and he came drooping out of a bubble in your ceiling, like the paint expanded, and then he.
No,
No,
no, more like the material itself started to form the shape of man, like the paint bubble itself
like
was in the
like
shape
feet
of man.
first, and then bloop.
Not really, actually. It's like the whole, like like the flat of his body came out like that, and then fell down, standing.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Like belly flopped almost through the
Gotcha.
ceiling.
And then he was doing like a
Like,
weird horse dance crab walk thing.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's like
And
Futurama.
he seemed very like big, bright, weird looking, overly happy face, clownish almost.
More creepy and with ill intent than clownish. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So what is it about? I mean, so the place I would go with that, and what we do if we were going to do a full analysis thing, is say what's going on in your life where the dream itself is set in the place you sleep, the place, say, you're most vulnerable, the place that should be the most comfortable, but suddenly you've got a presence that imposes itself upon you versus being invited. He didn't walk in through the door because he was your house guest. He came out of the bubble in the ceiling to drop at the foot of your bed, to be present, to give you this disturbing experience, to move in a very inhuman way, and this creepy, malicious expression, but then unable to physically interact with you. Scarier looking than actually harmful, and actually left the space without doing anything other than giving you a fright. And then, but in your dream mind also then persisting for a period of time in the living room. There's something about that story, that even that short story that's telling you something about you're going through in real life. When you think about it from that perspective, does it relate to anything you've been through lately? Unwelcome presence in a malicious feeling, but ultimately harmless manner.
Well, the people upstairs are very noisy.
That might
in
be
my
part of it
apartment.
too, literally coming from the ceiling. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Are they kind of
make
scary looking?
noise at they make noise at very strange hours, like they work the night shift or something.
Okay, fair enough.
And the floors and things are pretty thin. I mean, sometimes I can hear a conversation from upstairs.
Yeah.
So it might have been some sort of my imagination running away with me with that. I mean, I wasn't aware that I heard anything upstairs at that point, but maybe I did and don't remember.
We were talking about my the books I've been editing, and actually this reminds me of a story where there was a guy who he had, I'm thinking it was sleep apnea, just because of the description. So when he would start to fall asleep, he would choke a little bit, his throat would relax, and he would have trouble breathing. And his recurring nightmare every time he fell asleep was that a skeleton was choking him. And so he actually, this guy was some rich whatever guy back in the 1700s, and he hired a watcher to wake him up if he ever fell asleep not sitting up. So sitting up he was fine, but if he fell asleep on his side, wake me up immediately. So one night he started to fall asleep, and he had this dream that felt like it lasted forever, and this skeleton was choking him, and it was horrifying. And the watcher woke him up, and he said, "How could you, what am I paying you for?" And the guy's like, "As soon as your breathing changed and your eyes closed, I woke you up." Like, it was 3 seconds and it felt like it went on forever for that guy. So in this sense, it could have been multiple physical stimuli, and then your perceptions of these folks upstairs, and then you heard a sound, and all of a sudden, literally the sound is coming from the ceiling. So there's a person coming down to disturb you. And that dream could have taken 5 seconds, all that entire experience, and felt much longer.
And often when I'm in my bedroom, I assume their apartment layout is the exact same as mine.
Typically,
and
right? Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. And sometimes when I'm in my bedroom, I'll hear a sound from, their living room, and it'll sound like it's coming from my living room. So my imagination might, tell me, hey, there's like somebody in there, because it sounded like it came from your living room. The muffled nature of going between the floors is just about the muffled nature of, from my bedroom to my living room.
Sure. Yeah. And you said this is possibly was kind of your first experience with a lucid dream situation? You haven't had that before, or?
I I think I've had one or two before,
Fair enough.
but I think that's it. Yeah, I guess the other thing I'm sort of lumping that in with is a experience with accidentally mixing substances. Nothing illegal, Zoloft, weed, and wine, but
Right. Well, you never
it is.
know. And that's like how much of this is, because it's a very strange thing. It's like our external perceptions turn off, but we have an internal experience, which our brain is funny. It's like we don't really see. We do, but seeing isn't seeing. Touching isn't touching. There's a physical world. There's the nerves where our physical body connects with the environment. It shoots the signal to the brain, and that's kind of where we experience things. We don't actually experience the world at the tip of our fingers. We experience that our fingertip touched something in the center of the brain that registers touch, which is why blind people, blind from birth, your visual processing center is getting no information. So there isn't really seeing the world. There's processing, seeing the world. I don't know if that's making sense, but anyway, that relating to dreams, of course we can't tell the difference because our brain is doing the same function it performs when we're actually touching things. It's only when we're awake that we seem to be able to tell the difference. That, okay, I don't believe I'm dreaming right now, but if I go lay down, I don't know that I'm not awake. That's a bizarre phenomenon to me too, except with the lucid dreaming thing, which for a dream wizard, I don't know much about lucid dreaming in terms of, I understand the concept. I don't know that I've ever had one. I don't think I have. I couldn't tell you how to make sense of it, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard that you can train yourself to do it with methods, but it seems like it defeats the purpose. Like, why would I want control of my dream? Like the whole point is that it's random and unpredictable. Like,
yeah, it might be better that way. Speaking of, I kept talking about a lot of my book. Okay, so why am I talking about my book so much? Apparently I screwed up the formatting and the table of contents in my electronic book versions. So I've been going back and republishing each of them over this past week. And one of them I did was called Studies in Dreams by Mary Arnold Forster. She wrote it in 1921, 100 years ago. She actually lays out a method for dream programming. And she says it is specifically intended to help, children and other folks, but children who are having recurrent nightmares. Is that she was able to find a way to train herself to wake up or realize this is only a dream. And once she was able to consistently remind herself in her sleep that it was only a dream and she didn't have to be afraid, she was able to choose not to wake up. And then she started having flying dreams. And so if you're not tormented by nightmares and you like the randomness, nothing wrong with that. But if you are disturbed by a lot of bad dreams, there appears to be a way to program yourself to wake up, or at least take over control of your dreams and stop the bad parts from bothering you. And that just made me think of it when you said, why would anyone want to not enjoy the randomness? If it's pleasant randomness, probably you're fine. Yeah.
My dreams are usually fairly grounded. I don't have like crazy dreams. They're all like sort of things that can happen in reality, more or less. But
that seems pretty consistent with kind of your more rational personality, more logical type of things. Your dreams are probably going to be ordered that way a bit more, unless there's something. And a lot of things that are, Freud had some theories along with this too, but Jung as well. And the idea that Freud would say all dream symbols are representations of things hidden in another form. Not necessarily. Sometimes something is exactly what it is. But sometimes if something is too difficult to process, too painful to confront, we have too much resistance to it, you will get a lot of coded language from your brain saying, I know you're hesitant to look at this, but what if I show it like this? Is that less threatening? Can you think about it a little? Because this is a problem.
Like a fluffy spider instead of a real spider to confront like a phobia.
For sure. Yeah. Just definitely that idea of let me show you something similar or something in a less threatening form, just so you can kind of process it. Because your brain wants to confront danger. It wants to identify the environmental threats to our health and safety and whatnot. And do something proactive about it. So that's a lot of what we're doing in our dreams too. I was talking about that with what is anxiety, pain, fear. These are useful evolutionary tools. They're like the worst human experiences because they keep us from dying quite physically. So they're meant to be very unpleasant so the desire to avoid the pain of the emotion keeps us from the pain of death. Anyway, I can ramble on this stuff all day. We actually got through two dreams and some pretty good conversation. Do you feel good about the experience? This was worth your time?
I do. Yeah. I really enjoyed it.
Good deal. And you can always, keep us posted with stuff. I got the whole, you're in the Discord now, and tell your friends and family and folks out there listening. I just need people to talk to. I'll talk to anybody. You got a dream? Let's talk about it. So, but if you feel good, we'll wrap it up and then we'll talk after maybe for a minute to just say proper goodbyes, so to speak.
Sure thing.
Okay. Good deal. Well, then I'll just say, everybody, hey, thanks for listening. We've got our friend Brian here from Minnesota, and he's been gracious enough to share I think a very important dream about processing grief and the death of a loved one. And I'm absolutely certain, Brian, that a lot of people will listen to this and feel a very strong connection and a better understanding of what they've been through themselves. So I think that's very important to share these kind of things. Yeah, so I really appreciate that. And hey, I got books for sale. I got a website. Look in the description below and for all that good stuff. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.